Hi, everyone. I think I'm going to continue our theme of last week, which was breastfeeding. Let's talk today a little bit about weaning your child. Because along with the fun of having an infant is the need to transition them to a bigger kid way of feeding. So, and then we'll kind of tack pacifiers on here too, because it's sort of all one process, and if we can think about it all together, I think it becomes easier. So, look, babies are born knowing how to suck. But literally, they feed within an hour of life. So you've seen those videos on whatever, Nat Geo or whatever nature channel you watch, where the little moose can walk within an hour of being born. Yeah, your kid can't do that, but they can suck within minutes of being born. They're brilliant in this regard. This is something babies are born knowing how to do and born wanting to do. Every baby wants to do it to get food. Some babies do it for comfort as well. Okay. So, we spend those first couple days trying to just get them to breastfeed or get them to bottle feed and get in that sync of how we're going to do this. And then if you're an exclusively breastfeeding mom and you go back to work, then you have that transition period where you're trying to teach your kid to use a bottle, but they may not be into it. And so that's it's awkward for everyone. It's not fun. And then at some point you realize that you're going to have to stop and change everything about the way that you feed within a relatively short period of time. And how do you come about that? How do you do that? How do you make that happen for your kid? So I'm not going to tell you when to wean breastfeeding. Breastfeeding doesn't bother me as much. Dental-wise, it's not as big of an issue. And kids will wean off to some extent naturally if, one, we stop rewarding them with food, and two, as they become more independent and as we allow them to become more independent. Snuggling with mama is not going to be as much fun. So some of that will happen naturally. The rest of the bottle feeding and breastfeeding weaning issues usually have more to do with how and when we're feeding our kids. So I'm going to throw down a couple of biological facts, okay? Number one, unless your child has an inborn error of metabolism, and you would know this because you would have spent a lot of time in the hospital up until this point, unless your child has an abnormal newborn screen, inborn error of metabolism, your child does not need to eat at night after 6 months of age. They don't. They don't need the food. They're growing fine. They don't need to eat in the middle of the night. There's no biological drive to eat in the middle of the night after 6 months of age. And then you're thinking, great, but my 8-month-old wakes up at night and wants a bottle. Well, yeah, because if you woke me up, or if I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I cried and you brought me a brownie, I surely would eat it. I'm not a crazy person. And your baby isn't either. They're going to eat the bottle if you bring it to them. But they don't need it. They're not eating for hunger. They're not eating for growth. Just like we don't always eat for hunger, they don't always eat for hunger either. So they get into this habit of feeding in the middle of the night. But after about 6 months, yeah, that's not infant growth behavior. That's habit eating. And it's something that if you can start to break that cycle at around 6 months, you will actually make your weaning process so much easier. So how do you do that? So I am not telling you that you need to let your child cry it out at 6 months of age. You can. And if that's the right parenting choice for you, I think that's fine. I don't think you're going to do untold damage to your kid's psyche by doing this. But that was never the right parenting decision for me, and I know for a lot of parents, that's still very anxiety-provoking. So what I would say is, after 6 months, if your child is still waking up in the middle of the night and wanting a bottle or wanting to breastfeed, you can do one of a couple things. If it's a breastfed baby, send dad in there. Because, he's not going to give them milk. So that they don't expect that that person picking them up is going to feed them, and they'll start to make that association. Or you go in Rock them, hold them, cuddle them, just like you did when you were breastfeeding them, except leave the breast out of it. Now, they're not going to like it, and it's not going to be an easy transition, but it does, I think as a mom, you don't feel like you're abandoning your kid quite as much if you do it that way. So if your baby is still feeding in the middle of the night at 6 months of age, it's time to wean from those middle of the night feedings. Again, I'm not telling you to let your baby cry it out. I'm telling you it's okay to be there to support your baby through this transition. This is hard. But when you wake up with them, it's time to stop feeding them now. And here's something you need to know. They're probably gonna cry. They're probably gonna cry a fair amount, because you've changed their pattern, and that's stressful for them and it's scary for them. The point of having you in there, still holding them, still rocking them, is to comfort them through this transition and this change. If you expect that your baby's not going to cry when you wean them, I think that's unreasonable. But I think that we can do a lot to help our babies through this and really keep that connection, keep that attachment, but begin to wean them off of food they don't need. Because this is all preparatory for the next 6 months of your life. Okay, because here's the other piece of news. I want your baby off of the bottle and the pacifier by 12 months of age. Completely off the bottle and the pacifier by 12 months of age. If at 6 months you're still giving a middle of the night bottle, you are going to be behind the curve when it comes to getting your kid off the bottle during the day. So fight the nighttime battle first. Get your kid squared away at night. And then for the next 6 months, you have 6 months to work this pacifier bottle issue. And I know 12 months seems early, but at 12 months, your baby should have a number of teeth, probably at least 4 of them. And we don't want to mess those up. I also don't want to mess up the shape of his mouth as it grows, which pacifiers and bottles can do. So it seems, I think to a lot of parents, it seems early, but the truth is we've been weaning babies off of bottles at this age for probably as long as there have been bottles. We are more cautious now as parents than I think our parents before us and then their parents before them. I promise you your baby's okay, and it's gonna be okay, but it is gonna be a process. The earlier you start, the less stressful it is. The other thing about starting before 12 months is this. When you turn 12 months old, something happens to your brain. And everything that mom thinks is a good idea, you think is a bad idea. And anytime mom says yes, you say no. So if you wait until that developmental stage to try to wean something, yeah, you just made your job a whole lot harder. Babies between 6 months and a year are pretty compliant little people, and they're pretty mellow. So you won't get the same attitude, and it won't be as stressful, and there won't be as many tears if you do it gradually and you do it in this age group. So how do you get them off the bottle? My recommendation is to actually start thinking about this when you start bottle feeding in the first place. And here's my process. Only milk goes in bottles, whether that's formula or breast milk. Only milk in bottles. It's the only thing we put in bottles. No water, no juice, no nothing. Nothing else but milk. Bottles and milk go together. When you start introducing things like water and juice, which you're gonna do between 6 and 9 months, maybe a little bit here and there, a little bit of water, a little bit of juice, hopefully more water. Do not put that in the bottle. Put it in a sippy cup. And I know that there's people going, at 6 months? Yeah, at 6 months. There are ones with the valves that they have to suck on to get the stuff out, but it's a different shape than the bottle nipple. And that's enough of a transition to teach your baby that milk comes out of this thing with the nipple on it, and other juice and water and things come out of these other containers. I think it's actually really easy for little kids to learn to drink out of a straw. So the toddler cups with the straws are a huge pain in the butt to clean. That put them in all the little parts in your dishwasher. It just works better. But I think that even between 6 and 8 months, kids will start to learn to drink out of a straw if you kind of work with them a little bit. And so at that point, water and juice come out of straws. Milk comes out of bottles. As your child's diet evolves, then your child will kind of naturally transition away from the bottle because they'll start eating more solids and they'll start drinking water at the table with their dinner. And then they won't want as much formula, and their drive for formula won't be as great. Their drive for milk in a bottle won't be as great. And then ideally, you'll have started the weaning without really intending to, simply by introducing this concept of other containers holding other drinks. Right? This doesn't have to be an epic, tear-filled battle. It can be a gradual transition. And then once you start to approach 12 months, 11, 12 months, we want your baby to come off of formula for sure. There's no reason to feed your baby formula after 12 months. Cow's milk is fine. It'll be okay. So at that point, start putting cow's milk in their sippy cup and kind of transitioning them over on that side. And it will be easier to take the bottle away. It's not going to be simple. It's not going to be straightforward. There are going to be some tantrums. I promise you there are going to be tantrums, but it's what we need to do to take care of our kids. And so I'm trying to give you a pathway that's got the least tantrums involved, but it's not going to be zero. And I just want you to know that, kind of upfront. In terms of weaning breastfeeding, this is a little bit harder because babies will naturally go through a phase somewhere between 9 and 12 months where many of them kind of want to self-wean. They just won't want to breastfeed. And the reason is really simple. It's because the rest of the world is way more interesting than their mom. And so they may feed, but they're always looking around and they're doing, that whole routine. That is a natural time to wean your baby. That is nature telling you something. And I'm not telling you have to wean in that time frame, but I am telling you that if you allow the baby to direct the weaning, it's easier on everybody. If you continue to push breastfeeding, you can get them to stay breastfed for quite some time, but then you're going to fight that battle later of trying to get them to wean. And just like everything else, milk comes from a breast, but it's the only thing that comes from a breast, and it doesn't go in any other containers. And then offer your baby sippy cups as you can and kind of work them off. Not going to be tantrum free, but if we walk into this with the expectation that at 6 to 9 months our babies are going to start drinking other things from other containers, it gets infinitely easier. Now, what do you do if your baby's already 12 months old and you're just hearing this and you're thinking, crap, I am so behind the curve? Okay, this is not going to be fun, but it can be done. Okay, first things first. Move to milk goes in bottles, everything else goes in cups. Make some kind of divide for yourself. Make a time when you use bottles and a time when you use cups, if that works better for you. So we use cups at the table. We don't use bottles at the table when we eat with the family. We don't use bottles. We use cups. And then at some point, you're going to have to take the bottle away from your child. You will wean them down to a certain point, and then there may be a day where you just have to take the bottle away. I want you to avoid this if you can, which is why I recommend that you start early. But if you can't, you may need to emotionally prepare yourself for a couple of really hard days. So here's the thing. All toddler drama aside, normal children do not dehydrate themselves just because they're not presented with liquid in a container they like. If they are thirsty enough, they will drink out of the sippy cup. I promise. They will. And for some of you, if you wait long enough, you're going to end up having to do that really ugly cold turkey tantruming thing. And there's just not a lot of ways to get around that. That's why I say let's start early before the tantrums happen. In terms of pacifiers, I don't have a problem with pacifiers. I don't have a problem with pacifiers in newborn breastfeeding babies. I don't think pacifiers are usually our problem. So pacifiers also, we know it increases, or I should say decreases the risk of unexplained infant death. So SIDS, or whatever you want to call it, risk is lower in babies who use pacifiers. So there's every reason to use them. They comfort your baby. It's just like rocking or holding or driving around in the car until they fall asleep. It's that. But in a little plastic object that you put in their mouth and they're comfortable. The problem is, at some point you're going to have to take that away. As your child, so let's assume we've started at 6 months and we've created that milk versus everything else line, and we're starting to transition to sippy cups and straw cups in addition to bottles. Once your kid can do the sippy cup thing, it's time to restrict the pacifier a little bit. And what I would start doing is start as early as 6 months with the idea that pacifiers are for our bed. Maybe for our car seat if we're in the car. Pacifiers are for places we sleep only. So your 6 to 9 month old does not need to have a pacifier in their mouth all the time. There are other ways to comfort them. There are other ways to distract them. There are other ways to get their attention off. They don't need to have the pacifier then. Maybe when they're sleeping, and that's fine, and you can fight that battle later. But between 6 and 9 months, our binky needs to start living in our bed. And if they want it, that's where they need to be to use it. And I don't care if they sit in their bed, at 10 months old, if they try to get in their bed so they can have their pacifier and they just want to sit there and suck on it. I think that's fine. But creating that this is an appropriate use of this tool, this is not. Creating those lines will help you ultimately get them off of this pacifier. The problem is that part is relatively easy to do. It's the nighttime part that for most people is really tough. For me, as your pediatrician, I am way happier with just nighttime pacifier use than I am with daytime pacifier use. The less time, the better. So even just getting to nighttime is a huge accomplishment. And that's huge, and that's going to help your child's dental health overall. Again, some babies will just stop using the pacifier, just like some babies will just stop using their bottles, and some babies will wean off of the breast. And if you have one of those babies, that will be awesome for you. If you don't, then you are eventually going to have to take it away from the baby. And I'm sorry to tell you that. But there are some kids who will not let go of that pacifier until they are good and ready, or until you take it away. And the problem is they won't be good and ready until after their teeth have already been affected. So 12 months is the time to start taking away the pacifier. Now, I know that that's not reality for lots of families. My daughter was like 2.5 because there was enough going on in life. There was enough medically going on for her. There was enough going on socially that it was not a good time to take away her one primary source of comfort. So I say 12 months. I also say you got to fit it to your life and figure out what's going to work for you. Get down to night times only. And then at that point, when your child is comfortable with night times only for several weeks, you can start to take the pacifier away at night. Understand, you may have a kid in your bed. You may be sleeping on the floor of your kid's room. You may be holding your kid in the middle of the night. Your child may wake up multiple times and have trouble falling back to sleep because that's the mechanism they use to fall back to sleep. I need you to coach them through that. And we can, if you're having a particular problem, we can always sit down one-on-one and talk about how you do that. But you're going to have to talk them through it, and you're going to have to get them through it. This is going to be hard. But there are lots of times in your parenting career where you're going to have to transition your child from one behavior to another based on their age, because it's time to outgrow whatever this old behavior is and take on this new behavior. And that's always going to be a transition, and it's always going to be hard. This is one of those times, and I can't make it totally smooth, but if we start early enough, I think we can make it at least less stressful for everybody. Okay, so taking away pacifiers in smaller infants is okay. It's when they hit 2 and 3 that it's like, what do I do? So I know parents who have spent the weekend sleeping in their kids' room, just comforting them and talking to them and getting them to go to sleep. Once they go to sleep for about 2 nights without their pacifier, they'll be fine. Once they figure it out, it's not that hard. It's just they're primed to think that they need it, and we have to kind of unteach that. Some people, we use the pacifier fairy came to our house. So if you're not familiar with the pacifier fairy, it's a lot like the tooth fairy. So you put all your pacifiers under your pillow and you go to bed, and when you wake up in the morning, all the pacifiers are gone and you get a prize. I recommend that prize be something comforting, like a stuffed animal or a blanket or something they can then use that night when all their pacifiers are gone to kind of comfort themselves to sleep. So you've created that transition object for them. So not going to be easy, and it's not straightforward, but at least some tricks you can use to try to get this transition to happen as smoothly as you can. Now here's the hard one. What about thumbs? Because unlike a pacifier in a bottle, I can't take your thumb away. That's not okay. You cannot take your child's thumb away. How do you get your child to stop thumb sucking? Well, first of all, try to prevent it if you can. If your kid is a suck to comfort child, please give them a pacifier, because if you don't, they're going to find the thumb. And then you're not going to be able to get them. It's a much harder process. So use the pacifier if that's your kid. If your kid is already a thumb sucker, or if your kid is like one of mine who would take the pacifier out to put his thumb in his mouth, really kid, then I think you have a much harder battle ahead of you. And there's not a real good solution to this. There are devices you can put on their hand. There are that nasty tasting fingernail paint stuff that you can put on so it tastes bad when they suck their thumb. There are all of these things. There's dental implants, actually, that can be put in to prevent your child from sucking their thumb. And all of those work really well when your child is ready. But I hate to tell you this, when your child is not ready to stop sucking their thumb, they will not stop sucking their thumb. They will stop when they are ready, and not a minute before that. We've had to learn that the hard way in my house. We had to have a kid who was ready before we could really go there. And all of the interventions we tried, it didn't work because he didn't want to stop. And so he would find workarounds because I can't take the kid's thumb away. Discourage it if you can. If you can't, and your child is a thumb sucker, most kids will stop around the time in school when kids start asking them why they're sucking their thumb, which typically is kindergarten. For some kids, that will be enough. And they will want to stop. When they say, I want to stop sucking my thumb, the devices on their thumb, the nasty fingernail stuff, fine. That will help them, but they got to be ready. If they're not ready, I would start to ask why they're sucking their thumb. Look at the pattern. When do they do it? Do they do it only in their sleep? That's something where even just sleeping with a glove on could discourage that reflex. Do they do it when they're anxious? Maybe then we need to deal with the anxiety. And once we fix the anxiety, then we'll fix the thumb sucking. Do they do it when they're bored? Do they do it in certain places or at certain times. Try to figure out their pattern and work with that pattern to decrease the frequency with which they put their thumb in their mouth. Gentle reminders, not shaming, not scolding. They have habits just like you do. If you're someone who taps your fingers, clicks your pen, if you smoke, if you have other habits that aren't maybe the healthiest for you, this is theirs. So just like you would want someone to treat you with compassion around your bad habits that you're trying to stop, that's what we got to do with our kids, right? So role modeling compassion is key here. And then if you can't get them to stop, a counselor may be helpful to try to help figure out where this need to suck our thumb is coming from and how do we kind of transition away from that. Because kids are self-conscious about it and they don't want to do it, but they feel like they don't have another way to comfort. And maybe there's a professional out there who can teach your child other ways to comfort themselves if it's not working for you. I hope that gives you some kind of tricks and tools to get your kids weaning off of those baby objects and onto bigger kid ways of eating and comforting ourselves. This is not easy. This is not my favorite part of parenting. So, hang in there. If you need your pediatrician's help, you can always ask for it. But truly, this is one that you're going to have to kind of follow your gut and do what you think is right. But if you have questions, I'm always here. PM me, come visit, whatever works for you. I hope you have a great week. I will talk to you next week.